Hey everybody, so I'm bringing you guys another video today on cryptocurrencies, and in this video I wanted to talk about the basics of cryptocurrency mining. Now, mining within cryptocurrencies, it's really misunderstood. People don't quite understand how it works and why it works. However, without mining, cryptocurrencies cannot exist. You cannot have a functioning cryptocurrency if it does not have a functioning mining system. That can be proof of work or proof of stake. Generally speaking, proof of work works better, and we're going to specifically be talking about proof of work mining setups today, and I'm going to focus mainly on the Bitcoin network as well. But so that the question still remains, what is mining and what does it do for your blockchain network? So in the case of Bitcoin, obviously if you want to use Bitcoin, you have to send transactions, right? You have to, like, if you want to use Bitcoin and send money to somebody, that comes in the form of a transaction, and you send that transaction on the network. Well, the network has to accept it. Well, how does the network know what transactions are valid and which transactions are invalid? Well, that is all figured out by mining. So basically, the basic function of mining is to ensure that the network is accurate and secure. And what I mean by accurate and secure is that all the transactions are fulfilled properly. And then by secure, I also mean that you can't, like, duplicate transactions, you can't reverse transactions, you can't do some sort of hack or bug or something. And mining ensures that that doesn't happen as well. So through the process of mining, you will ensure that transactions take place, and then you will also ensure that bad transactions do not take place. And the way that they do this is through the use of block rewards. And these block rewards incentivize miners to play fair. And how they do this is that with each block that is solved, the miner who solves the block is the one who confirms all of the new transactions on the network for that block. In Bitcoin, each block is 10 minutes. It's approximately 10 minutes between each block, so every 10 minutes all the new transactions in the past 10 minutes get confirmed. And so the way that the block reward works is that the miner that solves the block, and the block is just a real hard math problem, but the miner that solves the block, they get paid in Bitcoin. And the reason that this incentivizes miners to play fair is because you will always make more money being a fair miner than you will trying to cheat the network. And so, or not always, in a healthy cryptocurrency. So as long as the mining, the algorithm they use for mining is healthy and it's a strong algorithm and they have enough coins being created each year, you'll make more money playing fair than you will trying to screw everybody over. And the reason is this: as soon as somebody does some sort of bug or hack on the network, like if you assumed that all the miners were attackers, I guess you could say, they could just lie about what was going on. But if they're lying about what's going on, then the transactions don't work in the blockchain, and so then that blockchain's value drops to zero. And so the reason, again, the reason that mining works is because you make so much money being an honest miner that there's no reason for you to try and cheat, because if you cheat, you stop making money. So it's all about a profit incentive. It's all based upon using the greed of the miners to benefit the network. So the miners give the network its security, and in return they get paid. And if they don't give the network security, if they try and lie about what they're doing, if they try and I guess you could say hack the system, then they lose all their money and all their work was for nothing. So they can do it, but they'll lose out on so much money, and they'll have to spend so much money just for nothing. So then the next point here is that the security of the transactions on a network increase with age. Like I said before, each block, at least for Bitcoin, each block comes out every 10 minutes. So after another 10 minutes comes out, a transaction will be confirmed a second time. So like, let's say you do a transaction, after 10 minutes you get the first confirmation. So then you know it's a pretty secure transaction. After another 10 minutes you get another confirmation, so it has two confirmations, and then you know it's even more secure, and then it goes on and on and on. And so then there are some transactions that have hundreds of thousands of confirmations, and those are very, unbelievably secure. Like, you can trust in those almost like you can almost unlike you can trust in anything else in life. It's crazy how much security you can get after like 10 to 20 confirmations on the blockchain. But the next point about the mining in cryptocurrencies is that bad or bugged blocks are rejected. Like I said before, the miners are incentivized by the block reward to play fair. So if there's a bad block, they'll reject it and they'll say, no, we're going to mine a new block and we're not going to use that one. And so why this is important is because if there is some sort of bug, and this has happened in Bitcoin once, there were 2 transactions to different addresses that had like 92 billion Bitcoins each. And so the miners saw that on the network and they were like, that's a big bug. And obviously that would increase the total supply of Bitcoin like by a factor of, I think, almost a million. But anyways, I think it's actually by a factor of 100,000, but it would have been increased the supply of Bitcoins by over 100,000 overnight. So the miners are like, no, that's that's a bug. We're not leaving that in there. So they just reject it and mine a new block. So that's the other thing about mining is that not only does it have all these incentives to make sure that it does work, in case something does go wrong, all they do is just reject the block and mine a new block, and that's all they got to do. So then the final point too is that the cryptocurrency mining, it's the power supply of cryptocurrencies. Another good word is it's the lifeblood of cryptocurrencies. And all I mean by that is that without mining, there is no such thing as a cryptocurrency, because without mining, you don't get any new transactions confirmed on the network. And obviously, a cryptocurrency needs to confirm transactions on its network. Otherwise, it just doesn't exist. So the first point then, I'm going to talk about all these in a little more detail. The first point was that the mining ensures network accuracy and security. Again, mining is what accepts and rejects transactions. Like I just said before, they reject bad blocks. So if you can reject bad blocks through mining, then that's what controls which transactions get in, and so it accepts all the good ones, rejects all the bad ones. The only way this can not work is if an attacker controls 51% of the miners. And basically, the reason that that's the case is in Bitcoin. At least this is for Bitcoin specifically, but for Bitcoin. Whichever the miners vote on a new block, and if 51% vote on a block, it gets accepted as the legitimate block. And there's many reasons for this. One is because you can actually have a split in the network. Like if 2 miners find the same block at the same time, which one do you accept? You have to accept one, and so having 51% is good there. But anyways, in order for an attacker to succeed, in terms of screwing up the blockchain and having illegitimate transactions through the blockchain, they have to control 51% of the miners. And so the amount of miners on the Bitcoin network is massive, so that's a multi-billion-dollar investment. And the other thing you have to understand is that the attacker can only cause problems with wallets they don't own. They can do this thing called a double spend, where they will send money to someone and hope that person they send money to will send them a product, and then they'll try and reverse the transaction real quickly. They can try and do that. That's a one-time attack that they would do, because as soon as that happens, it gets found out immediately. But they can only do that, they can only do that for coins under their control. So they are very limited. Like, not only do they have to control the mining network, they have to have a majority of the mining network in order to even do this attack. The only coins that they can do any sort of attack with are coins that they control themselves. And so another good thing about this is that it makes it really easy to check if somebody's doing an attack like that, just because everything is public. It creates 2 separate blockchains, and you can look at the Bitcoins that were moved and or the Bitcoins in question to make sure that you can trace down the address and try and see if you can link it to a person. But anyways, there's all this security involved with how the mining works, and it's all based upon ensuring that the transactions are valid. And again, so long as the mining network is offering a high profit incentive for miners to mine, then you don't have to worry about the cryptocurrency. You know it's strong, you know it's going to be healthy, and it's going to be very hard to kill. So you can have faith in it. But then again, the final bit here is mining's the power supply of cryptocurrencies. If you can't ensure that all transactions are accurate and valid, then obviously your currency doesn't work. So without mining, which is the process that validates new transactions and rejects invalid transactions, you can't have a cryptocurrency. You have to be able to reject bad transactions in order to have a functioning currency. So our next bit here is just how the block rewards incentivize the miners to play fair. So I talked about the block rewards a little bit. This block reward gets a little complex because there's a lot going with it. It's a very important aspect of cryptocurrencies, and basically all it is, it's a complex mathematical problem. And there's no easy way to solve the mathematical problem. It's basically a problem where the only way to solve it is to guess and check. And so you know how many possible solutions there are, and you also know how fast the computer network is or like the miners are that are trying to solve the problem. So they basically just do a calculation, and they say, okay, let's say the Bitcoin network does 1 billion hashes per second. It's way more than that, I think, but let's just say the Bitcoin network does 1 billion hashes per second. And so in 10 minutes there's 600 seconds. If you wanted the Bitcoin network to be solved in 10 minutes, if it did 1 billion hashes per second, you take 600 times 1 billion, you get 600 billion, and you'd get an answer, or you change the complexity of the problem to solve the block so that it would take on average 600 billion hashes before it would be solved, and then you would ensure that on average Bitcoin would solve a block every 10 minutes. And so again, as the hashing power of the network rises, so does the complexity of the math problem that the miners have to solve. So it's not like set in stone that it's 10 minutes per block, but it's just on average it's going to be 10 minutes per block. And then the miner that solves the block, they're rewarded with the coins. And again, this is what keeps the miners honest. If you're rewarded with coins for being honest and making sure that the network is accurate, then you're going to have a huge incentive to make sure that you don't lose all the profit you invested on your miners. You want to make that profit back, so you're going to be honest. And it's all about profit, incentive, and greed. And the blockchain captures this for a service, like it uses the greed of the miners for the supplying the network security for the blockchain. So it's really interesting. But the other thing about block rewards is that not only do they ensure that transactions and stuff are valid, but they also govern the coin supply. Now this is this is super important because coin supply is huge in any sort of currency. Obviously, if you create too many coins, you're going to have a lot of issues with inflation. If you don't create enough coins, you're going to have issues with deflation. If you cannot change the coins that are produced based on supply and demand, you're going to have a lot of volatility, and you can see a lot of those problems in Bitcoin right now. It has a high coin production rate, a decently high coin production rate, so it's sort of an inflationary coin, except for the fact that since it's new, it's gaining in value. And by inflationary, I just mean I think it's like 7%, or I don't know what the percentage is of new Bitcoins added to the network each year compared to the total supply, but it's a decent amount. So it's not as though Bitcoin's a deflationary currency right now, but the price, like I said, because it's new, it's increasing so rapidly that you don't really know, like the supply that it's being produced in doesn't really have an effect on its price. And so again, that just goes back into the fact that the mining or the block reward is completely steady, like there's no changing it. And so part of the reason why Bitcoin is so volatile is because of its block reward. I'm not saying that you want to necessarily try and change the block reward to avoid that. I'm just saying the block reward is super important as far as the health of the network, the price of the coin, whether or not it'll be useful as money, just because obviously you don't want it to create too many coins and you don't want it to have too little. There's a real golden middle ground that you got to find, and it's real hard to find. But anyways, the next point I'm going to talk about is that the security increases with the security of the transactions increase with age. And I guess just going back to the mining bit, but I do want to make a video here in a little bit that'll discuss the mining a little bit better in detail. just ways that you can change the block reward itself. So I'm going to make a video in detail on the block reward and changing the block reward to try and get the strongest cryptocurrency just based on the block reward alone. So I'll have a video on that in a little bit, but I don't want to go over the block reward too much in this one, just because it's a huge, like, there's a lot of economics involved if you really want to go into it in detail. But going back to the security of the transactions, each new block that the blockchain has, it adds a layer of security. So every 10 minutes on the Bitcoin blockchain, when you add a new block, that's an added 10 minutes of security. So transactions that have happened like 100,000 blocks ago, which would be, you know, 1,000,000 minutes ago, those are super secure transactions. You know those are valid. A transaction that has one confirmation that happened 10 minutes ago, you're pretty sure that that's valid, but you know, you might want to wait a little bit if it's a large amount of money and you want to make sure that, you know, you don't get scammed or something. Like I said, it's super hard to get scammed through a reversing or through a double spend. You have to have a huge amount of money to do it. So it's really something only like the biggest players in the Bitcoin network really need to worry about right now. But yeah, if you need more security, you just wait for more confirmations and then you have more security. And then finally here, if the block reward drops, so does the network security. So what I mean by that is transactions are like every confirmation is only as secure as the computing power behind the confirmation. So like the first the first confirmations when Bitcoin was created didn't have much computing power behind them, which means that it would have been easy to, or at least easy compared to now, to perform a 51% attack on the network where you gain the majority of, or control of a majority of the miners. So those transactions, when they occurred, wouldn't be as secure as Bitcoin transactions today. But again, because they happened so long ago, obviously now we know they're completely secure. But if the block reward and the hashing power on the Bitcoin network were to drop significantly, that just means that the security on the network has dropped. Basically, the way to think about it is the security of the network is equal to the hashing power that the network has, because it means that's how much computer power you need to try and even attempt to hack the network. And like I said, if you hack the network through a 51% attack, you don't get anywhere. You lose a bunch of money. You'll drop the price of the cryptocurrency that you're attacking by a lot, but you'll lose a huge amount of money in doing so. Our next little bit that I want to talk about is the bad or bugged blocks and how they're rejected by miners. Again, if mining is what accepts all the transactions coming in, it has to be able to reject them, and miners basically have all the say on which blocks are accepted and rejected to some extent. I mean, obviously you can have, if you had a hostile miner, they could try and dispute it, but you need 51% to determine which one gets accepted and which one gets rejected. And why this is important is because there are bugs in the Bitcoin network. Like I said before, there have been bugs where 92 billion Bitcoins were created, and that only happened once, but when it happened, all they did was reject that block and create a new block, and so they were able to patch the code without any sort of bug of actually affecting the network. And so then the final bit here too is that the healthy mining network equals a healthy blockchain, and that's just because obviously if you have a good profit incentive that makes sure that all your miners are honest, then that ensures that all bad and bugged blocks get rejected. The only way you will have a bad or bugged block get accepted into a blockchain is if it's like a dying blockchain. If it has no miners behind it, if there's no block reward, like there's got to be something really screwy going on with a blockchain in order for bad and bugged blocks to be rejected. So as long as the blockchain is healthy, you don't really have to worry about any of the issues involved with mining. And again, this is all just based on the incentives of it. It's got a lot of basically greed incentives that ensure that the network is valid and accurate and secure. So then this final bit too, again, it's just that mining is the lifeblood of cryptocurrencies. Without mining, there's no new transactions that are accepted. If your mining network isn't healthy, some of the new transactions that are accepted can be invalid, and that will really hurt your cryptocurrency. So if you don't have, like, if a cryptocurrency doesn't have a good mining algorithm, like, it's pointless and useless, and there's no reason to use it. The next point, if you don't have a lot of mining, you can get attacked. So yeah, then that's what I just talked about. And then that also goes again, if the block reward gets dropped, so does network security. If the block reward drops, that equals that you will have less people mining. So that the 2 and 3 points here, number 2 and 3, those go sort of hand in hand. If you don't have very many people mining, you're going to get a 51% attack. If you drop the block reward, that also leads to fewer people mining. So they're not the exact same points, but they're very similar. But again, if you just want to understand mining in general, the basic things that you have to understand is that mining is the process by which the network confirms and rejects transactions, and it also acts to ensure the security of the network from outside attackers. So the block rewards that mining uses in Bitcoin, each block is accepted every 10 minutes on average, and the person who figures out that block, the miner who figures out, is rewarded with bitcoins, and because they're rewarded with these bitcoins, it incentivizes all the miners to play fair, because if they lie about the transactions in the block, then the value of bitcoin drops, and so then they've just wasted all that money they spent on those miners, and then the value of the bitcoin they got from mining the block drops to nothing. So there's no point, all the profit incentives are pushing all the miners to be honest. There's no reason, there's no sort of greed reason that would push a miner to try and hack the network, because it means they will lose more money than if they were being honest. That's sort of the beauty of the blockchain. And then the security of the transactions, like I said, that increases with age. Every confirmation is that's just an additional layer of security. So transactions that have thousands of confirmations are highly trusted. Transactions with one confirmation, while they can be trusted, are not as trustworthy as transactions with more confirmations. The bad and bugged blocks get rejected. That's how the blockchain is basically considered to be unhackable, is because if something goes wrong, they just reject the block, and they're just like, yeah, we're not going with that block, we'll just create a new one. We'll just solve the problem again, the hard math problem that is the block. But anyways, yeah, so the bad and bugged blocks, they just don't occur. That doesn't mean that users can't have errors. Like, a user can have an error using a cryptocurrency and lose their money, but the blockchain itself will not have any errors, so you don't have to worry about your coins just disappearing for no reason. That can't happen. And then our final point is that the mining is the power supply, or the lifeblood of cryptocurrencies, and that's, again, if there's no mining, there's no new transactions that can be added to the network. So the network is functionally dead if there's no mining, and if the mining is, if there's not a whole lot of mining securing a network, or if the mining is, if it's an unhealthy mining network, then your cryptocurrency is good as dead. It's just going to die a slow death. But anyways, I hope this video helps to explain cryptocurrency mining to you. It's a very complex and intriguing topic, but if you can understand cryptocurrency mining, then understanding cryptocurrencies as a whole becomes a lot easier.